Can you just, we're just about finished. Could you just talk to me a little bit about the experience of going out and getting dressed up and dancing? How did you ever work all day and then have all of this energy to go out and get dressed up and dance at night? And people were good at it, right? It was part of the romance.
When you're 21 years old, you can do that all night, and there's a joy to it. And again, there's a feeling of belonging and a shared experience. There's a kind of when you're with chums and you go out or with a girl you love, and it was just being done. It was a thing to do, and in other words, you weren't going out on your own really. You're going out with a lot of people, and you're enjoying each other. Hi, Bill. How are you? Good to see you, Charlie. And it was wonderful. It was exhilarating. If you like music, you had a pretty girl in your arms. Man, that's that's not work.
And the club owners, the people
Yeah.
like Steve Crane and stuff, what were they like? Were they part of the group, or were they? How did they fit into the whole picture?
They were sort of the major domos, yes, and like for instance, the head waiter at LaRue, Bruno. I mean, you were happy to have him recognize you, and you were friends, and it was, as I said, it was a community thing, and a shared experience, and it was like a club. You all knew each other, and it was a small town then. The town no longer exists as a small town. Now it's disparate. It goes in different directions. People live in the East. They live in Europe. But then it was kind of like a club. And so old Hollywood was behaviorally very different from today.
Was there a lot of jealousy? Was there a lot of stuff when everybody would go out and somebody who had been out with one guy Tuesday night was with somebody else? Was that?
That I wouldn't know unless I read Llewellyn's column. I never really paid too much attention to that. I was a pretty good athlete, and I used to play tennis and play polo and all those things, and pretty girls. It was a way to grow up. Like I have a wonderful son named Charlie, and he says, "You know, Dad, I kind of wish sometimes I'd grown up when you did." He said, "Wow, that must have been a great time." I said, "It was." I said, "How's it with you?" He said, "It's okay now, but it just seemed like so much more fun then." I said, "It was."
I think it really was. And I think that I just have one more thing. Janet told me a very funny story about going out once with Howard Hughes and how he asked her to cut his meat on the plate. She was convinced that he was mad, and then she looked out the window the following night and he was outside watching her door. She was completely terrified of him. Now, she came to that much later. In his heyday, was Howard Hughes really the catch in town?
Howard Hughes has been maligned. I knew him. Excuse me, I used to shoot with him. Howard Hughes was an amazing inventor. He was one of the world-class flyers. He held world's records, as you probably know. He was a very special guy in his own particular field. Now, what people have done, they have judged him after the accident, which happened a couple of blocks from my mother's house in Beverly Hills when a plane crashed, and they had to put a metal plate in his head and everything else. He looks like Mao Zedong with a scraggy-looking beard. That's not the Howard Hughes I knew. He was bright as a penny, and he had Johnny Myers as his procure, shall we say. And what his personal habits were with these ladies, some people told me he had one under contract. He never even touched her. But the main thing is that he was no fool. He stood up in front of the Brewster Committee in Washington, D.C., when the Spruce Goose, they were going to give him big trouble. And he said, "I will prove that this will fly." And it flew like about 250 yards, and that's enough, and put it back down in the water. A stubborn guy, but brilliant. An inventor, a world-class flyer, highly intelligent, eccentric, quite true. But the image of his being some kind of a dumbbell is absolutely wrong. I don't know about his proclivities with the various ladies he had.
I don't think he was dumb at all, but don't you think that he might have been better off if he had stayed away from the movies? Because to go from his early life to becoming the engineer of a brassiere, I mean, it begins to get a little bizarre, don't you think?
Yes, and he was not very good at that either. I don't mean the brassiere, I mean the movies. No, it's a terrible temptation, and it's the same thing is true, I guess you could say, in a minor way with Audie Murphy, with the greatest war hero we ever had, and throwing him into an arena which he was not qualified to handle, because the Russians have a special little city which they build for their war heroes who've gone beyond the pale, because to be that heroic you have to be abnormal. And they take about a year or two to mix them with so-called normal people till they can come back into society. Well, Audie was thrown right smack bloppo after the Congressional Medal of Honor winner into motion pictures, playing himself of all things. So it's I don't think that motion pictures is a really good therapy for people who have had a rather bizarre life. It's a chance to make them crazier than they were before.
Yeah, I think I definitely think that he he had to want to be part of Hollywood because that was what everybody wanted. So he was seduced by it very, but I don't think he had the chops for it. I don't even think he had as good a survival instincts as Ava. Do you know? I mean, in her own way, I think Ava was able to cope a lot better than Howard Hughes. You know, I mean, the proof of the pudding. Someone told us that Howard Hughes started to get a little heavy with He understood survival. Okay, this is what I have to do now. Knock you down.
That she did. She understood survival.
And I think the stars did, don't you? I mean, don't you?
Yeah.
In a basic way. I mean, almost in an animal way. I'm not talking intellectually now. I'm talking about the fact that they knew at a certain point how to protect themselves.
Yeah. The carryover of life to motion pictures, the saddest of all today things, I think, is River Phoenix. The fact that this brilliant young actor, and again the cleavage line between the madness self-induced by drugs or whatever, but really a brilliant young actor who self-destructed like that, you know. It gives people a right to question, is what you're doing you, or is it what you're doing you in a combination of other things that makes you appear to be you? This is why an old English actor once told me. He said, "Young man, you're going to try to be an actor." I said, "Yes, sir." He said, "No crutches. Not the first shot of brandy before you go on. Nothing. Otherwise, you'll never know what is it and what is you." And he said, "Also, it's habit forming, and you won't last long. No crutches."
Yeah. And many of the stars of your era did
yeah.
have those crutches.
Oh, yeah. Most of them, as I mentioned, they all died before they were 60.
Right.
So that's a short but a happy one, I guess.
Well, Dell said that. He said Lana would come in and she'd be crying, and the very first thing that he did in the morning was to go make that iced martini. She'd feel much better then, you know. And I think that just the idea of getting yourself together, especially, look at, they talk about Lana Turner going to the Academy Awards.
Different time. People didn't live very long, and different time frame. Now, I went to the thing that yesterday, the thing where they made me Mother of the Year, whatever it was, Mothers of Motion Pictures or whatever, and they helped celebrate Francis Lederer's 100th birthday in November. And Francis Lederer, for those who don't remember, was a big, big star on stage and screen. He did the original Golden Boy on stage. I saw him when I was a kid. Terrific body and a wonderful thing. I told him he was in a wheelchair and I was 100 years old. I said, I saw you in Golden Boy. You had a terrific physique. He said, that was then.